So we are going to get started, and hopefully, as people come in, they can, partake in our webinar. First, I want to say thank you so much for attending. We have some awesome individuals that are here with us, some panelists. So we are going to get started. I first want to introduce myself. I am Verdell Jones. I am the founder and CEO of Share, Inform, Enlighten. And the mission of Share, Inform, Enlighten is to empower individuals and communities through diverse perspectives, literacy promotion, and resources that foster personal and professional growth. So we do a few things, but one of our big events is giving a poetry slam scholarship to students attending college here on Long Island. So that's one of our major things. But now we're getting into things that really can support people and help people, and again, just have them have that personal and professional growth. We work on three tenets or three pillars, if you will, for Share, Inform, Enlighten. One is diverse perspectives and dialogue. The other is educational resources and skill development. And the other is promoting literacy in all forms. So those are just, some of the things that we are really wanting to get across to individuals. So tonight, we wanted to have a workshop that talks about coping with grief during the holiday season. And grief takes on a lot of different forms. A lot of times people just think it might be grief because of a lost loved one, but there's also other types of losses. It could be a job, it could be a relationship, could be just a major life change. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and we're going to have a panel discussion as well as talk about some strategies and things you can do to help you cope during this season. We know that the holiday season can be rough for a lot of people. Things change when you have a loss, so we want to talk about that. But I want to introduce our panelists first. I am so excited. We have these outstanding mental health professionals who are really experts in their field, and they come with just a host of knowledge to really help us unpack some of this. So I'm going to start off with Brittany. Brittany Becker is a licensed health counselor dedicated to empowering individuals on their journey to mental well-being. Brittany, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
And then we have Dr. Allison Catone. She's a school psychologist here on Long Island. Her compassion and understanding for helping children and families during mental health challenges is nothing short of amazing. And having worked with her firsthand, I can attest to her dedication in working with our most vulnerable children. Allison, thank you so much for being here. We are happy to have you. And one of the things we are going to be talking about is how to talk to children, how to communicate with them in a way that they can cope with grief and loss as well. And then we have Phoenix Hutchinson. She is a licensed mental health professional, wellness advocate, and the visionary owner of Healers Haven Wellness Solutions. Phoenix, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we want to get started. We want to make sure that we respect everyone's time. So we're going to talk a little bit about what grief is and what the stages of grief are. So Brittany is going to share a presentation and kind of talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so we're just going to do a quick, brief intro to grief just to set up this conversation that we're going to be having tonight. When I think of grief myself, and I challenge those of you who are in this webinar tonight to think for a moment, when you hear the word grief, what immediate words come to mind, what thoughts, feelings, maybe any feeling in your body even, what immediately comes to mind. And I think that for many people, sometimes it's confusing. Whether you've been through grief and loss and have identified the loss, or you've been through it and maybe you haven't yet really talked about it or verbalized what these feelings are, it can be really confusing. So my goal in the next couple of minutes is to try to give a little bit of language to what grief means, what some ways are in which that it manifests in our lives so that we can better understand it for ourselves, for our loved ones, and be able to talk about it. And then know if we need to reach out for help. And also know that it's okay, even if it's not the worst day of your grief, that it's still important to reach out for help and talk to somebody about it. It can be really powerful and meaningful to your own growth and navigating the world when you have feeling all these feelings. So, what is grief? It's the normal response to a major loss, such as the death of a loved one. But as Verdell said, it could also be due to long-term illness, your own illness that you're going through. It may be the loss of a job, a loss of a relationship, a loss of a part of your identity, or a change in your identity. There are so many different things that encompass this word grief and what we feel that we have lost and what we have lost. So it can include, when we talk about grief, it can include feelings of great sadness, anger, guilt, despair, and all of these emotions and more combined, sometimes at the same time, sometimes for years we feel certain emotions, and then years later in our grief process and our story, other emotions start to come to the forefront. And understanding how our grief evolves as we continue to evolve and change and go about our lives. We also can experience grief in physical ways. We'll talk in a couple minutes about the physical, spiritual, psychological, emotional, mental, all the different words and ways that this can come about. But again, overall, this is the normal response. I can't stress the word normal more. A lot of times when we think about grief and sometimes the unspoken feeling or belief that we have that our grief should be something we feel and we quickly get over, and any other things that we're feeling we should just push aside and don't talk about it. There's this feeling sometimes that grief is not normal, and it is normal, and we all experience it one way or another for some reasons or not. And I think the most important thing that we can do, or one of the most important things that we can do here tonight, is normalize grief, normalize the experiences that we have and that we all have it and experience it different, and normalize talking about it and getting help if we need it, and what help even looks like. The difference between grief, bereavement, mourning, we say all of these different words, and it's important to kind of understand what they mean. And it pretty much is the same feeling, but to really separate them. The grief is this response to a major loss, the way we feel. Bereavement is the period after a loss during which the grief and mourning occur. So the bereavement period. Now, some people, again, feel that this period must be a certain amount of time and we need to then move on or change or do different. And depending on the situation of our grief, the circumstances around it, the bereavement period may be very different from person to person. In mourning, the process by which people adapt to a loss. Mourning is greatly influenced by cultural beliefs, practices, and rituals. Okay. So what many people often think about when they think about grief is the 5 stages. And a lot of times when they think of the 5 stages, which is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, these are words or feelings or moments of grief that people have used to understand their grief process. But for many people, they feel that this could box them in, or it can be confusing that I don't know if I'm in denial, and maybe if I'm in at anger, then maybe I guess I experience denial. People can sometimes see these 5 stages as limiting or not the full picture. And it sometimes also can confuse people in that it has to go in this linear process. And it just doesn't work always like that. However, it definitely has helped give people a little bit of understanding that there are changes and transformations throughout our grief process. Now, what I have experienced myself and by working with other people is that when people experience these 5 stages, it may be at completely different timelines. It may be denial and anger at the same time. And also something that some people typically get confused, or they're saying, well, 2 things. They'll come up and they'll ask about bargaining and about acceptance. And what does that mean? And how does that show up for me? And is that good? Is that bad? Is this going to impact the way in which I can continue and move forward with my grief? So the bargaining phase, this would sound a lot like if someone was saying, Someone who is maybe going through the loss or anticipatory grief of a loved one going through a major illness. And they may be sitting in their grief and saying things like, God, if you just let them live, if you make them better, I promise I'll do everything right for the rest of my life. This bargaining process, and whether someone believes in God or not, this is just one of the common examples of bargaining that we'll hear, where we're saying, if you just do this, if you bring this person back, take me, all of these different things that we're trying to make sense and reason and trying to pull at any string we can to I guess get through some of the pain and to try to figure out a way to navigate this. And the other word that comes up, as I said, for a lot of people when they think about these 5 stages of grief that can be challenging, is acceptance. And one of the things that I think is really important, and I stress to the people I work with and the people in my life, is that acceptance does not equal approval. To accept does not mean that you have to be okay with what has happened. That means that you're completely understanding of the situation, you've made sense of your loss. To accept can just simply put, to be able to acknowledge a reality, what has happened. That does not mean that you have to then feel okay. And I think that's important for people to understand, because some people can say, I don't feel okay, and I'll never forgive, and I'll never be okay with what happened. So I guess I can't move forward in my life or understand my grief in any other way. So again, acceptance does not equal approval. And we can accept with also having really complicated feelings of sadness and anger. So the next area that has come up that a lot of other people have talked about was Warden's model of grief. So unlike the 5 stages of grief, where that's talking about ways in which what we feel or what we're supposed to go through with grief, this is saying the how. So this is just another model or another framework for people to start to understand and process grief and how to adapt to loss. So for some people, looking at the 5 stages, it may not really reflect what they're feeling. And maybe for some, they prefer to look at kind of a roadmap of what Warden has described here as one, accepting the reality of loss. Again, don't need to approve it. Just say, yep, it happened. Experiencing pain of grief, adjusting to the environment, and redirecting emotional energy. Again, this does not have to go in a linear format. This doesn't have to be a certain amount of time. It just does. This type of model says that when we've experienced all this, that's when we'll know that our grief is complete, which is also kind of a hard thing to really say, because I don't know that grief and your grief work and your grief experience is ever truly complete, but it does at least give you some insight into what you're going through is normal and to be expected as it changes. So again, grief is anything but linear. A lot of people will say it's just like this straight line. We're going to go through denial, turn left to anger, go to bargaining. But really, it looks like all the different colors mixed up at the bottom in reality. It's all a combination of it all at all different times. And sometimes it doesn't happen right away. Sometimes people have an experience of loss and they'll turn around and say, I feel nothing. I didn't even cry. Am I a bad person? I'm not sad. I'm not this. And that's where they're at. And that is okay. And at a different point, all of a sudden, all of these other feelings will start to come up and all the different colors we'll see at the bottom there too. So as I said in the very beginning, your grief is unique to you. And if you're looking at this right now, and it would be helpful to take a screenshot so you have some of the language to explain, whether for yourself, to be able to check in with yourself and say, what am I going through? What am I feeling spiritually, socially, mentally, physically, emotionally with my grief at any point? Or if this is also something just to have as a guide when trying to express to a loved one what you're going through. A lot of times, grief and the feelings and the way in which it manifests is not always obvious. It's not always the anniversary of someone who I've lost is today. So now I feel this, this, and this. It may be a random Tuesday in July. You're noticing that you're really detaching or pulling yourself away from people and finding yourself a little bit more, withdrawn and coming to yourself and wanting to be alone. You're noticing maybe you're a little bit forgetful on this day. And it doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have, you don't need permission, or it doesn't have to be, unless it's the day or an anniversary or something specific to trigger these feelings that are related to your grief, that they can't exist, because they do exist. And the more that we can identify that when something has changed a little bit with us, or we're having an off day, the more that we can name the things that we're going through and be able to give permission to it to be maybe related to our grief and the loss, and that that's allowed to come up on a random Tuesday in July. Okay. Okay. All right, and then we're almost through this. Complicated grief is something that tends to come up when you look into, should I go for grief therapy, grief work? They'll talk about grief and complicated grief. And complicated grief specifically is related to the condition where if the feelings of grief are so intense that they're impacting your day-to-day life. This is the difference from someone going through really hard, intense emotional states, and someone going through that and not being able to then take care of themselves, show up to their job, show up to their commitments, and all of the other responsibilities. When we're starting to see that, where your grief is impacting your ability to function, that's when we definitely would encourage talking and reaching out, talking to someone in the healthcare, in the mental health field, talking to someone in, if you trust spiritually, a coach, a mentor, anyone, a family member, and starting that process. The grief you experience and the relationship you have with your grief over the lifespan can change. And I think a lot of people will say, well, my grief is complicated because I lost someone at a young age, and throughout my whole life, I've still been grieving, and it's this long evolving process. That's still different than complicated grief. Right. And so it's important to differentiate the grief that we feel that we cannot actually get up and function versus the grief relationship we have throughout the rest of our life when we lose someone or lose something important to us in our lives. Okay, so things to keep in mind that I find is really important. No two losses are uniform. Sometimes all you need to do, because often people say, well, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help. And you know what? So what I'll just do is I'll just leave that person alone. They probably don't even want me around. So sometimes the best thing to do is to just ask someone or tell someone, I'm here for whatever you need. If that's alone time, great. If that's just to sit next to you, great. If it's just have a talk about the person that you lost or something that's going on, awesome. But to ask that, to give someone permission, even though they don't need it, but permission to sit there and ask for what they need. Things we want to stay away from. We try not to respond to someone going through a loss with phrases that start with or sound like, at least. If we start, I could twitch hearing it. If you find yourself wanting to say, and we're all human, and sometimes we just want to make someone in front of us feel better. And I think one of the biggest traps and the things that tend to have good intentions and flip is the at least. At least they're not suffering anymore. Right? At least you were able to say goodbye. These are things that have good intention behind it, but land really hard on someone who's going through grief. Everything happens for a reason. And there are a lot of people who do believe that, and they say that for themselves. It's really hard if you're not at that place or you don't have that belief to hear someone else tell you that in your grief. They're in a better place now. Same thing. Or they wouldn't want you to cry. Or how about even related to that, if someone were to say, what's that anger going to do for you? Right? We want to allow space for all the feelings, all the expressions, because they exist to signal things and to take care of us and to show us what we need. When we push them down and say they're not allowed, well, guess what? They still come out. They just come out in other ways. Right? And you'll get over it in time. Two last things here before we come back to the main room. People grieving shouldn't have to feel like they need to make sure you're comfortable with their emotions. I think for many people, what stops them from talking about it is that they often will get the sense that they need to change their grief story, or if they pick up that you're getting a little uncomfortable with hearing them be upset, that they have to downplay that, or they need to make sure you're okay versus what they're going through and taking care of them and reaching out for help. And then last, it's not a bad thing to talk or to ask about a loved one who has died and use their name. I find that a lot of people that I work with love when you ask, like, tell me about your friend. What was their name? And then you use the name and you talk about them, and you're not scared to really bring them into the session and hold space for the feelings, but also hold space for what that relationship is or was and who that person is still, whether they're physically here or not. So that is the end of my portion. So thank you all for listening. Again, we're going to have Q&A and panels. So if there's any questions on anything that I shared, please feel free to put it in the Q&A.
Thank you so much. I think the takeaway in sharing that information is, normalizing what you're feeling, and it's not the same for everyone. It could look different. And I love the things that people say these things to you, like you said, at least, and that last part that you were saying. I think it's important for when people hear that to take a step back and say, that might not be true, and this is the way I'm feeling, and I should be able to feel the way I would like to feel. So thank you for that. I wanted to it was a lot of information and a lot of that you had shared in reference to the stages of grief, but not only the stages of grief, but I love the other things that you were mentioning about the acknowledging the new reality. I would like to take a step back a little bit and ask Phoenix if she can give us we wanted to do a grounding exercise in the beginning, and we jumped right in, and I think it's important for us to do that. So Phoenix, would you mind leading us in a grounding activity to kind of get us more relaxed or minds open?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Brittany, for sharing this. You know, it's so important that we understand how this amazing vessel works, especially when we're going through grief or trauma or loss of any kind, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But right now, I just want us to step back and kind of just check in. Brittany shared some very important information, giving you some background on what grief really is, what it looks like. But if you are on this webinar, you're here for a reason, because you may be experiencing grief or know someone that is. So let's just check in, because we've taken in a little bit of information and it may be bringing up some things right now. And the body is very sophisticated, and it has a way of responding to things that it hears or sees, and certainly what it feels. So I'm just going to ask everyone, just take a deep breath, close your eyes. And this is an opportunity to really check in with yourself. Check in with your body, your emotions, just how you're feeling. And not just with what's going on in this space in the webinar, but also just your day. What may have occurred during the course of this day, what may be going on in this world right now. And this is an opportunity just to get grounded, to get centered, and to be present. Because what usually happens when we are experiencing some kind of grief or loss or change or transition or trauma or anything is that we disconnect and we get in our head, and we need to get recentered and back in our body. So here's an opportunity to do that. It's the quick grounding visualization. You can use it at any time, but it's certainly an opportunity to use it tonight. So just make sure your feet are planted firmly on the ground. Nothing crossed, no hands crossed, no legs crossed, just firmly planted on the ground. And you're going to take in a nice long inhale through the nose. And your belly should be expanding. So this is like a belly breath. So you inhale and feel your body and your belly expand. And then you're going to exhale out the mouth. Inhale through the nose again, belly expanding. And you can count like 3, 2, 1, and then exhale out the mouth. And if you find your mind just running, that's where that breath comes in. Inhale, and then exhale out the mouth. Now just let your normal breathing just flow through your body. Let your thoughts drift. Don't try to name it or put it in a box. Just let them drift if they come up. No attachment to anything. Just be. And try to focus on your breath. The natural flow of the air flowing through your body. It's an opportunity to feel the stress leaving your body as you connect to a sense of calm. An opportunity to go within. So visualize a large tree with a strong trunk extending down to the center of your body, from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, rooting you, grounding you. You could press your feet down into the ground. And take a few moments to feel this power and this vibrant energy flowing through you. Try to visualize the tree roots growing out of the bottom of your feet, going into the ground, making their way deeper and deeper to create a feeling of fortitude. With each breath, allow the roots to go deeper, anchoring you to Mother Earth, stabilizing and centering you. With each breath, press your feet down deeper. Knowing in your heart and your soul that this is your inner tree, rooting you. Be the tree, become the tree, allowing it to provide you some inner strength to keep you safe, to keep you protected, to keep you strong when life gets overwhelming. So inhale again through the nose, belly breath, extend the belly, and exhale.
Thank you so much,
Back, you're
Phoenix.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. I love that.
Have to wake
Um,
people back up.
right. Especially after a long day, a long day.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I appreciate it. So with that being said, this is, a place for us to you can there's a Q&A section, so please ask questions in the Q&A, and then we'll if I can answer them, I'll answer them, but then we can at the end we can take a look at them. So we wanted to we wanted to tell you and share with you some strategies and some ways to cope during the holiday season. We learned about what grief is and the stages of grief. And we also had a wonderful grounding exercise. Thank you, Phoenix. I think a lot of times people don't understand the importance of doing some of those exercises because we don't take the time to stop to do that, and it's so important to do that. I have to work on that myself. That should be one of my New Year's resolutions is to actually to practice that, because it does help
Yeah.
with so many things going on. in the world and in your life, it's sometimes we lose sight of that. So let's have this dialogue and have a discussion about how to cope and how to manage grief. We're going to talk about how to help our children that are going through it. As somebody, as an adult, when you lose someone and you have children, how do you talk to them about it? Because they're hurting as well, and sometimes I think we lose sight of that while we're hurting. So um, I guess I just want to open it up and talk about how to kind of manage our expectations during the holidays. What can we do? What would you suggest that we give ourselves grace, and how do we do that? It's great when we say, oh, give yourself grace, but really, how is that in action, and what can we do about that? So anyone can chime in on that and just talk about that a little bit.
Sure, I can jump in. Um, So one of the first thing that comes to mind, and I think this is with a lot of holiday stress in general, but specific also to grief, I like to always recommend that people think of a way to cope right before an event, in the middle of it, if you need an out, and at the end to bookend the events. So if you know that potentially going to this family dinner is going to bring up certain feelings for you, trying to do something before that's either grounding or a way that you even feel like you're connecting to a person you've lost or you might miss during the event, doing something before that brings about positive emotions for you or a sense of groundedness. And then having a little bit of a plan. You're not going to be able to plan exactly how you feel at any moment, but knowing, should I feel overwhelmed? My out is, hey, I know that dog always needs to go for a walk. I'm going to offer to take the dog for a walk around the block. Having your go-to things in the middle, and then at the end, knowing that you might get through this whole event fine, but all of the stress leading up to it and the worry about what I might feel afterwards, let's say you get through the event and it's perfect, let's say perfect, and you get home and now you have all of the emotions of, I was trying to keep it together for so long and now it's crashing. So to
Mm.
have that thing that after I'm going to do. And that might mean doing like a gratitude or writing in a journal or listening to this, the Wicked soundtrack, any of the stuff that you need, but just kind of having that set up, have a game plan for yourself. That would be
Right.
one of my top ways to cope through
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And I think it's like I love the plan piece of it, and it's okay to, if you have to leave for whatever reason, if you're at someone's house or family member, just do it. And I think it's giving ourselves the permission to do these things. And that's kind of where we get caught up. We're like, oh, we can't do that. We can't leave because, I'm expected to be there. I'm expected to act a certain way. So I think giving ourselves permission is so important in that.
Yeah, I was going to say too, I think managing expectations, right? So, like, there's all these expectations of what the holidays should look like and how you should feel happy and joyful and that you should enjoy every moment. Says who, right? It's so like managing those expectations and being okay with not being okay in that moment. Or, like Verdell said, maybe leaving a little bit early or even not attending sometimes. It's not that I don't encourage people to be with their family and their loved ones, but if that's not going to be helpful to you, you don't have to be there for other people. So I think that it's really important to manage expectations in that way.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I want to just remind people that to be gentle with yourself,
Mhm.
because we tend to just, above and beyond grief, loss, just in day to day, especially women, we tend to kind of abandon ourselves sometimes in situations. And we have these assigned roles in families, right? So there are the expectations that come with those assigned roles, especially if you are the one, you're the caregiver, you're the go-to, you know, you're the one that everybody expects to cook all the food or bring all of the presents or whatever it is. You have to drop that in these situations. And it's okay, because what happens then, you feel guilty and shame or something like, okay, this obligation. And this is where you really have to, like I was saying during the meditation, is you have to check in with yourself. Like, what is this story that you have laid out and played in your mind. And then you have to question that story. You know, this is where self-inquiry comes in. Like, is it is this really true? Or is this what I've been programmed to believe is how I'm supposed to act or be? And it goes back to, you know, what everyone's saying already, like give yourself the permission to say no, or to say, maybe I can't do that much, because we're all containers. We all are containers. And we have to know what our capacity is, especially in these moments of loss, grief, and transition. So yeah, give yourself permission just to check in with yourself, and it's okay to say no, and or to pull back or say, I can't do that much. This is what I can actually tolerate at this time. But that comes with self-awareness.
Yeah, I just want to go back, Phoenix. You mentioned something about programming, you know, and is there what are some steps people can do to not feel that obligation, or to maybe even deprogram, like, you know, like you are the one that does this in the family during the holidays. You're expected to do this. How does one go about deprogramming that? Because it's very difficult to do that, especially when the expectation is on you. How do you do that?
Well, I'm going to say the quick version is take yourself off the pedestal. Okay. Because that's what happens when we have these assigned roles. One, you have to be aware, because sometimes you're not even aware. You know, a lot of the work that I do with my clients is helping them to become self-aware of how they're showing up, not only in their families, but in every system that they're a part of, whether it's at work, whether it's their friend group, in their marriages, or with their mates. And so, you know, you have to be aware, like, what role am I playing? Like have I, you know, not only have I been assigned this role, but have I adopted it, and it has become a part of me and is a part of my every decision and choice. And you know, it shows up, it's going to show up everywhere you show up. So you have to start to renegotiate, not only with other people, but with yourself first, because that's everything's going to start with you, especially in these situations. So it starts with taking yourself off one, being aware, and then taking yourself off the pedestal, and start really looking and examining, you know, these roles and responsibilities that either have been programmed in you and you have adopted as an adult. So it's an opportunity. And I always say, whenever there's a big life transition, a loss, grief, you know, any type of big change in your life, is actually an opportunity to reset and recalibrate, and to be able to start something new, as coming back home to yourself. So that's really where it starts.
To piggyback on that too, I think we need to normalize asking for help, that it's okay. It's okay to say, I'm just too overwhelmed and I can't make the lasagna this year, right? Something like that. It's okay. And somebody else will do it. Or if you can't bring the magic, you can say to a friend, I'm just feeling a little bit down right now, but I really want my kids to feel that magic. Can you bring them with you and your family when you guys go to that Christmas tree lighting? It's okay to ask people for help. And I don't think that we do that enough. And again, I think women especially, right? You try to be that pillar of strength and to not show weakness. But in actuality, it's healthy to show weakness and to ask for help, and to show and be a model for your children, for them to understand that it's okay to ask for help, or to cry, or to not be in the mood. So it's important, because you want to model that, you know, for everyone else around you as well, and to say, I need help. I can't do this alone.
I had someone say to me once that I'm someone also that was like, I got it. I got it. Don't worry. I don't need the help. I'm okay. And someone had stopped me once and told me that I was selfish for that. And that changed everything for me, because I was able to see that me going through my grief alone and not inviting people in to either go through it together or let someone show up for me was not giving them the opportunity to also show that they can show up, that they can be a part of this, and we can go through it together. I think to go off what said, of course, not going through this alone, And also, when we talk about expectations, having an understanding with yourself that not everyone is going to have the capacity to be there for you and give you exactly what you need. And that doesn't mean that you're not, that you have to then just give up and go about it alone. There might be someone else. Think of someone else who maybe it wasn't the obvious first choice, but someone else who maybe does have capacity for you. And also okay for us to say, similar to what you were saying, Allison, is it's okay for us to say, we just don't have that extra capacity right now. And that's okay to set limits and boundaries there. Definitely. But bringing someone in, I think also to go along with the coping ahead, finding who your buddy is at this event and saying to them, having a plan before of like, hey, do we got each other during this? If I just need to like pull you aside and ask for a hug, is that okay? Like just have that game plan. And especially for kids and little kids that don't know and are so much watching all of the grown-ups for how we navigate, they don't know to say, hey, I might be upset during this, or I might feel that it's tense, but I don't really know why. To put language and give language first, say like, hey, when we go here, I know this is the first time grandpa won't be there. If things come up, that's okay. I may feel sad too. I think remembering them also is key to helping with the expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to talk about communicating with children. There's a couple of things that you all said that really stood out. First, pedestal. I love that. Take yourself off the pedestal. Stop. That is that kind of hit me a little bit, Phoenix. I'm not gonna lie.
We're all guilty of it.
And then the other thing is, this one, ask someone else to bring the magic. I mean, that is so key, because you do think you're on that pedestal. So you think you always have to bring the magic, but you can ask somebody else to do that. I love that. And then the other one is selfish. You're being so selfish and handling this alone, basically, right? Or not letting someone else in and thinking that you have to be the martyr. I think that's really the theme with a lot of this, is as as caregivers and having kids, children, all of the things that we have to do. I think that those are very key. So thank you for that. I love that. All that kind of hit home. So thank you. So in the grief and in the loss, are there certain things that people can do to honor that loss? I have one of my a favorite movie of mine is Coco. And what they do, in the tradition, is they put pictures up of their relatives that have passed, so they can remember those relatives. And if they don't have those pictures, it's like they didn't exist, kind of like that Day of the Dead, is the theme around that. So what are some things that people can do, or traditions that you may have had in speaking with people that have gone through grief, or some suggestions that you've given them to kind of just honor those individuals that may have passed or that you've lost?
This one is kind of simple, but sometimes the most obvious things, aren't so clear to us in the moment. But talking about people, and Brittany brought this up, using their names, telling stories, bringing them to the event with you, and remembering them, and grieving them, and talking about them, and crying about them. But not just this empty dark hole in the room, right, where like nobody's talking about it, it feels forbidden, but to bring the emotion and bring the person or thing we talked about too. It's not always just a person. It could be the loss of a job or a relationship, things like that. And feel free and open to bring them to all of these events and holidays with you. I think it's an honor to do that for people, as simple as just talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just chime in real quick. Just one of the things that personally, and I have recommended, to clients is, even if you have items like I'm wearing an indigenous headband that was my mother's, because in honor of her. So just a way you can have like an item, a brooch or a necklace or clothing, whatever, that you can wear or you can adorn yourself with, as a way to honor that loved one during the holidays. Another thing that I've recommended is like scrapbooking, having the pictures and making a beautiful scrapbook out of it. And that's like a memory book of that loved one that has passed on. And then y'all can share it and talk about the person, over dinner and over the holiday, festivities. This is so many different ways. A favorite song that you play. Another thing, I bought a gold tree. My mother used to love gold and silver trees. She never wanted a traditional. Every now and then we'll get a real tree, but she always loved like sparkly, shiny things. That was really, embodied who she was. And so I bought a gold tree, so I'm gonna put my gold tree up and, put some nice decorations on it. So it could be anything like that, just to really keep the person's spirit. Their spirit is always with you, but just to really kind of bring it in alive and have them in the room.
Yeah, I love that.
This topic is so, it's always really meaningful to talk about because it can be really loaded. There are many people who feel that the only way to honor them is to do it in the most perfect, elaborate way. We have to do the biggest philanthropy event. We have to do the biggest thing ever. And I think it's really beautiful. I think a lot of people like to do a lot of good in the name and to have a legacy. But sometimes along the way, when we do that, we start to lose the person and what they were about and start to lose ourselves and not honoring what we also need to take care of ourselves along the way with potential survivor guilt and grief related to that. Some people can kind of say, if I didn't get this perfect, they're never going to forgive me. Or how could they have we lost them and then I don't show up the way I needed to make this perfect event happen in their name. And I like to give people, when we talk about grace and giving them grace, is, I believe that really honoring the person in any way. I mean, it could be, I like to think of like, what are the five senses? And like, is there a way that in like a cologne we spray or baking brownies or using different senses that bring us that feeling of what it felt like to be in their presence? That's enough, right? It is awesome to do big grand events and also these small things. But I think the most important thing too is to not lose sight of how we honor ourselves on behalf of our grief as well, right? To still honor the person while taking care of us too, and coming back to that and having like security, knowing I did this for me, and that makes me feel connected, because when I feel connected to myself, I feel connected to the people that have been in my life.
I love that. Thank you. And it's okay. It's okay, because we talked about mentioning people, talking about them. We're big on, in our family, telling stories about individuals that have passed on. We love to share that. And then sometimes emotions come up. And when those emotions come up, I think, again, it's just having, being okay with it. We'll be sobbing in the family room because, we'll start off with this joyous moment because we're playing music or we're just talking, and then all of a sudden something hits. And I think it's okay that that happens. And I think it's also okay for people to know that it might continue to happen for forever. And that's okay too.
Yeah, there's no, and I'm glad you brought that up, Burdell, because I think what happens sometimes with people, they don't know really what to say. When someone loses someone and they're like, well, what do I say to this person? I don't know. Or even not even just with loss of like a loved one as far as the death, but also like divorce or separation or job, or sometimes people don't know what to say, or they say some of the wrong things, which I think Brittany spoke about earlier. And it's an opportunity to be able to create a dialogue, or not. Sometimes it's not saying anything. Sometimes it's just your presence. Sometimes it's just a physical touch, with permission, of course. you know, a hug or just putting your hand on a person. Sometimes you don't need to say anything. Sometimes you just, maybe it's a prayer, maybe it's a scripture, maybe it's a mantra. So we can do that for ourselves as we're healing, but also I'm just letting people know that may know someone who's lost someone. They're like, I don't know what to say or do. Send them a gift, send them some flowers. You know, I remember when my mother passed, my friend that lives in Chicago, she just sent me a beautiful bouquet of gardenias. It was so nice and just said, I love you. If you need me, call me. You know, and that was this wonderful, okay? Because she was far away, she was in another state, but I felt her love. You know, so it doesn't always have to be this grand gesture. And even for yourself, sit with the feeling, sit with the emotions. You know, you can't, the only way through is through. The only way through is through. You can't, you know, speed the healing up. It doesn't work like that. And like Brittany mentioned earlier, just not a linear process. It may start, you know, with anger. You may go to deny. You may come back to something else. The more anger, it's going to be all over the place sometimes. And everybody's experience is different. So just if you're a person that said, well, I lost someone and I was, you know, I was able to go to church or I went to grief counseling and I was fine. Well, why? It's 2 years later, 3 years later, and you're still grieving? Yeah, that's okay. You know, everybody is different. So don't think and then start to condemn yourself if you feel like, well, why am I still sitting in these feelings? Why am I still breaking down crying in the store or whatever your reaction is? Everybody is different, and give yourself that space to breathe.
You had Brittany, in the PowerPoint, you had mentioned grief that was I'm not going to say extreme, but it was
Complicated.
complicated. Yes, complicated grief. And you know, you gave a pretty concrete example. You can't go to work, or you might not be able to. You can't really function. But what happens when individuals are in that moment, in that grief? They might not be in that heightened level of grief, but their personal relationships can suffer. They can still work. They you know they can get out of bed. They can do all of that, but there is something where they just, I think somebody had mentioned they're pulling away. So how does someone kind of cope with that or begin to deal with that?
With the changes of their relationship or how their grief impacts their social
Yeah.
and all of that. Well, I think it's like Phoenix was saying, checking in with yourself and seeing like, what do I need right now? What is it that I'm pulling away because potentially the people surrounding me are not actually helpful in this moment, and that I am taking care of myself by pulling away and trying to shift. And maybe I do need some me time. It's also okay to say I want to be alone. Or am I pulling away because I just don't have the language to let someone in? And then therefore people may have assumptions that I don't want them to reach out or that they did something wrong. So I really do think the more that you can kind of like study your grief, like understand, try to name as many different things that are coming, even if it's not exactly right, but try to put words to them. I think that's the best way we can start to understand ourselves, to then understand why things are having a ripple effect on our relationships and what we need to do to let them in and help them understand us.
Yes, somebody had put in here, put a question in, how do you help support a friend who you notice is pulling away?
I think honesty is a really important factor when you have a loved one, a friend who is starting to pull away, to bring it to their attention. They might not be aware of it. They might be aware of it, but they don't know how to address it. So when you say, hey, not in a way where you're offended, but in a way of, I'm concerned, you seem to be pulling away. Do you need more help? What can I do? I think that when those disruptions in relationships start happening, counseling, go and talk to somebody, get in there with a professional. And again, it doesn't always necessarily have to be a psychologist, a social worker. It could be a clergy member. It could be somebody from your community. But really starting to kind of when it starts to impact your life at that level, I think it's important to kind of take it to the next step. And when it's your friend who's pulling away, obviously we can only control our own behaviors and not others. So there's only so much we can do in those situations. But I think being honest with them and letting them know that you're there for them, that you support them, but that you've noticed these changes. And can you help them in any way to get more help?
So let's talk a little bit about children and children and their and them dealing with a loss or grief. Again, loss of a loved one could be a separation or divorce situation with students. How do schools help children in that if the parents do let you know that this is happening? And how can parents communicate with their children about loss?
So I think, in terms of the broader conversation about children, right, and what that looks like, because grief is going to look different for children than it may for adults, because they may not have the capacity to language to be able to communicate what it is they're feeling. And I think especially the younger child, like a preschool level, elementary level, you might be seeing things that they might not even understand that that's what it is that they're feeling. So you might see things like decreased verbalization, they're getting very quiet, increased kind of clinginess, not wanting to separate from you, some regressive behaviors like bedwetting, thumb sucking, things that used to happen. Those are kind of more of like the nonverbal things that you might see in younger children that might indicate to you that they are having a hard time grieving a loss. As kids get a little bit older, more elementary and high school level, you might start to see those things like withdrawal, irritability, depression, sleeping more, grades aren't good, sleep disturbances. So like there's a lot of signs to look for children that might be a little bit different than what you might see in an adult. In terms of, I'm a school psychologist. I'm also a clinical psychologist. But I think that the schools are a huge asset for families and that they shouldn't hesitate to reach out, because there's so many supports there. There's psychologists, there's social workers, there's guidance counselors. Sometimes it's just a beloved teacher that a student happens to have a connection with. And there's a lot that we can do. There's individual counseling that can be provided. There's oftentimes bereavement groups in school because there's many children who have had loss. And so to get them together with peers, for them to see that they're not alone, that what they're feeling is normal, and that they're not experiencing this just by themselves, could be a big thing. Even just, and Verdell, you know this as we used to work together, sometimes just an email out to the teachers that are working with them to just say, hey, just so you know, the student's going through a difficult time, please take it easy. Maybe give them a little bit of leniency when it comes to that grade. Maybe it's okay if they've been absent more than usual. But reaching out to the schools could really lend the family support and take a little bit off of the parents to let them know, hey, somebody else is also looking out for my child.
And I think parents also communicating, right, with their children about what's happening and what's going on. I think even when you're looking, when you're talking about a divorce or a separation, letting children know, we always hear it's not your fault. This is just something that we're going through, that's happening, and just on their level letting them know that this is what's happening and not keeping it a secret from the children as well, I think is very important. Having that dialogue on their level, and to get some strategies or some tips with that, a school psychologist, a counselor can be helpful in giving you, the parent, the language to be able to talk to your children about those things as well. So I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely. We do a lot of consultation with parents, right, on how to handle things at home. And again, some of it's very specific to the family and the events and what's happening. But you can reach out and get help from us for you, right, and how to do that with your children. And it's absolutely a great asset to use. And I also think too, sometimes we think children don't know, or they don't notice, or they don't hear They know it all. They hear it all. They see it all. They see the changes. So to just not talk about it actually brings more fear and more anxiety than if you have those open conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just want to add, definitely, the parents need to model what they want to see, right? So it goes back to that self-care and checking in with yourself and like, how are you showing up, in the household, whether it's divorce, whether it's death, so that you're modeling, even if you're struggling, right? You're modeling something that they can actually look at and say, oh, okay, this is how mom's dealing with this, how dad is dealing with it. I can follow this lead, and it's being authentic in that process and in that exchange with the child, like you said, being honest. But not only that, but just making sure that they are clear that you're okay. Because that's another thing where children may feel that they have to be the parentified child and taking care of mommy now during this process, or daddy, or whatever the situation is. And so then they will start to feel the burden, and you don't want that to happen either. So it's checking in and making sure, how are you showing up as the parent is very important. Having an open dialogue at their level, of course, depending on what age they are. And then also, leaning on the village, hopefully there's an extension of the village where there's, some communication on how to support the child through the process as well. Okay, so yeah, just checking your own energy, because remember, we're all energy. And those energy exchanges are so, so important when you're going through some type of grief or loss. So guess what? Even your fur babies, they can pick up on the energy as well. So let's not forget our, pets and cats during these processes. And even a loss of a pet is also something that, children struggle with, and even adults, right? So we have to, when we're talking about loss and grief, we have to encompass all of those different factors, and that, understand how we're showing up in that process. It's going to be important.
The title of this webinar is Coping with Holiday Grief, but all of the things that you're mentioning really, it's throughout the year that individuals are dealing with this, and the strategies and the coping strategies that you're giving individuals really is helpful throughout the year. And I guess my question is, I mean, I guess it's obvious, but why is it exacerbated during the holiday season? What are those things that really it just is, and why is that? And I guess just to say, and helping people deal with that and having maybe different things that they do, but why is it exacerbated during the holiday season especially?
I think a little bit is, again, those expectations, right? We see things on movies. Now with social media, it's in your face all the time. You see everyone living their best life, and the family looks perfect, and they're in front of the tree in the city and all of these things. And you're like, I don't feel like that. I don't feel like that. I don't look like that. And managing those expectations that you should be happy, that this should be the, merriest time of the year, doesn't have to be. Right. So managing your expectations, I think, is really important.
I think there's also a lot of change in routine and schedule and structure and moods because of shopping and doing all this and setting. There's a lot that goes on just in stress in general. And I think that we're more susceptible to feeling like intense emotion states when we are not particularly focusing on like our routine, our structure, our self-care. We're just going and going and going. So I think it's kind of a setup too, that when you combine that with this image of what we're supposed to be, like Allison was saying, it's like the perfect storm to feeling the feels a whole lot harder.
Well, I think also it's the time of year. It's the end of the year. So people are thinking, just like you mentioned, Burdell, New Year's resolutions, people are thinking, oh my goodness, another year is ending, coming to a close. I have this significant change or loss in my life. What is the future going to look like? So it's not just grief, depression, it's also anxiety. is
Mm.
underlying, like, what is the future going to look like? What is tomorrow going to look like? I don't even know what I'm doing today. I don't know what's going on in my body right now. You know, I don't know what to feel, what to do. So there's a combination of these different intense emotions. And, you know, just for all the reasons that the ladies just raised, you know, because of the holiday times, whatever, but it's also, it's just a time of year, and that we get ready to cross into a new year. And it's like, then it's also a time of reflection for a lot of people, right? So if you have this void now because of the loss, whatever that loss looks like, then that reflection is like expanded. And it's really like, okay, how am I going to fill this void? How am I going to move forward now, you know, because of this loss, whatever that loss is. So I think that's a big factor.
There's also like the environmental factors, like you're saying, Phoenix, it's the time of year, right? We have the shortest days. So there's the limited sunlight, which is hugely impactful. It's
Yes.
cold. We're staying inside. We're not going out. We're not seeing people. We're not getting the sunlight. So, you know, there's that seasonal affective depressive disorder, which is a real thing. And that happens to also coincide with the holidays. You know, you can have that independently of a loss, but then if you compound it with a loss, it's going to be that much more intensified.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So what I would like to do now, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put the questions in the Q&A. I just also want to let everyone know that's in attendance today, we have a wonderful resource guide full of great information that they all have shared. Our expert mental health professionals have shared. So I put something together and I'll be emailing that out to everyone. It really is just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful resource guide that you'll be able to use and share with people as well. I want to ask each of you if you can give us a takeaway, a message, something to empower participants as they navigate through this season. I mean, we said a lot of things in reference to giving ourselves, you know, be gentle, grace, take ourselves off that pedestal, ask for help, all of that. I love that. But if you could just, you know, give us some words of encouragement. Brittany, I'll start with you.
Sure. I would say that your relationship to your grief, is everlasting and ever changing. And it can really, in some way, it doesn't have to be this depressing thing. It could be something that is a reminder of what you loved that you had to have lost, and a reminder of where you started and where you are at now. You know, I know that grief changes with every transition and milestone that we go through, and it can be hard. And also it can just shed light on how far we've come and what we've gone through. So I think that there's a lot of power and strength and resilience that comes up through the grief process that I think sometimes we forget that we have that through that, even through all the sad, hard parts. So I guess the power of resilience was what I would share. And you go through this.
Phoenix?
Yeah. I am going to give three things that I think is very, very important during any type of loss, transition, going through grief. Everything comes back to the relationship itself. And any type of shift or loss, it's going to require a new narrative and a new story. And it is an opportunity to do something new, not only to do something new, but to become someone. And it may not feel like that in the moment, but the three things that I would say is to make sure you're setting clear boundaries, not only with others, but with yourself. Understand your capacity, which I mentioned earlier, but I'll just say a little bit more about it. Understanding your capacity, like I said, as a container. Sometimes you can be a gallon, sometimes you can be a pint, sometimes you can be a quart. during those, especially the holidays, and you're dealing with some kind of loss or grief, you might be a pint in that moment. And in one day, you can go from being a quart to a pint. So you have to, again, check in with yourself. What is my capacity at this moment? And be honest with yourself. So this is a time for you to really be vulnerable and honest with yourself first. And this is how you set those boundaries, not only with other people, but with yourself. And then the third thing is protecting your energy. And protecting your energy is not just about, your energy exchanges with other people, but also with social media, the internet, technology. Take a media break, take a media fast. It's a lot of energy siphoning that happens from being online. Okay. So be very, very, especially in those times that you're trying to heal, you want to take time away from all of the hoopla in the social media world. So those are the three things: setting your clear boundaries, understanding your capacity, and protecting your energy.
And Allison, thank you, Phoenix, and thank you, Brittany. Allison?
Sure. I would say ask for help. There's people that care about you and want to help you and don't know how. And you're not alone, and people are there to support you in whichever way you need to be supported. There's people that have a lot of professional ability to help you as well. So if you're at a point where it's really dark, go ahead and reach out and get some help, because there's a lot of things that can get better. And manage those expectations. Very similar to what Phoenix was saying. Don't be so hard on yourself. Allow yourself to have your container full and say, that's enough. I can't take anymore.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I just wanted to reiterate that I will be sending out a resource guide to everyone who attended this evening. A lot of great information, where to find help, things you could, there's podcast suggestions on there, there's book recommendations for adults and for children. There's ways that schools can support you and your children. There's also some websites that you can go to as well. Just a wealth of information. There's a great workbook and journal on there, and they're all provided by these lovely ladies here. So I want to say thank you to them. Before we leave, I would like Phoenix to end us out. I don't think we have any more questions. So Phoenix, if you can give us a, just end us out how you do.
All right. So let me, let's see. I wasn't sure if we was going to have time, so I should pull it up.
We have a little bit of time.
We have a little bit of time. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so let's do, yeah. Okay, let's do a heart meditation. Okay. So everyone could just, close your eyes, put your hands over your heart, and just breathe, normal breathing. And this is a practice that you can do anywhere or anytime if you're feeling any kind of distress or emotions, even if you're at work in your office. This is a wonderful thing that you can use, and it's relief, and it's focusing on your breath. So you're going to inhale through the nose, belly breath, expand the belly, and then exhale. We're going to do that 2 more times. Inhale. Then you can count 3, 2, 1, and then exhale. And keeping your hands centered on your heart. And you can actually do a little bit of a slight massage. And this is just giving some love, comfort, care to yourself. And then you're going to visualize something that is beautiful and meaningful only to you. So it can be sunset. It can be the face of a beautiful child, your child. an image of a favorite vacation spot, whatever is going to bring you warmth and comfort. And I want you to just breathe in all the goodness and the love and the joy that comes from visualizing that image. And I want you to feel it. Feel the sensation of those emotions and let it just penetrate your heart while you breathe in. Take a deep breath, inhale, and then exhale. Inhale, and then exhale. And then sit with the love, the joy, the positive energy that comes from the image that you have placed in your mind. I know for some people it's hard because the mind starts to narrate and go to your to-do list, but this is when you need this most. So inhale, then exhale. Close your eyes. Just breathe normally. Pause. Penetrate your heart. Just breathe. Remember, your breath is your life. Inhale through the nose and then exhale. And Burdell, you awake?
I'm back. I'm back. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much to all of you. Brittany, I know you said that you do have a grief counseling group coming up.
Yep, I will be starting a new section of my bereavement group for adults starting second week in January. So if anybody's interested, if you know anyone who might benefit from it, please have them reach out to me. I know my contact information is with the resources packet. I'd love to have people join.
Okay. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. You are awesome, awesome, awesome. And this was so informative and so helpful. So I thank you. I know, it is so busy during this time of year, and for you to take the time to bless us with your knowledge and information, I am very grateful. So thank you. And everyone, have a great night.
Thank you, Burdell.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Take care.
Night.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye-bye.